today, asking my questions to you because I represent Dallas and the northern suburbs of Dallas, and we are one of the fastest growing cities in the country, and we are grappling with the traffic congestion problems that come along with that growth, and our growth is not going anywhere, right? And we also have, I think, a rich history of aviation. We have a number of great aviation companies and transit hubs in our area, and so I'm extremely excited about your pilot project in Dallas. But while the idea of hopping on an air taxi and being able to leave all of that congestion behind sounds great, we obviously have to address some of the hurdles and safety issues that might come up as part of that, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that. Uber Elevate has plans to begin flight tests in Dallas next year, with commercial operations beginning in 2023. In addition to pilots, what types of jobs will these commercial operations bring to my area?
Great, thank you for the question. Yes, we intend to, working in conjunction with our partners who are actually building the vehicles, start demonstration flights to be able to demonstrate to the communities that we're working in, like the Dallas Metroplex, the value, the value proposition essentially of the quietness and kind of helping people to understand where the technology is going, and that's really why we're leaning into doing this as early as we can, and we won't do it any earlier than it makes sense to do it safely. And we think that by moving expeditiously through the certification process, it's possible to get to certified commercial operations by 2023, but obviously that depends on the regulators and the companies that are working with the regulators to kind of move through that process in the right way. We can't start operating things until they're certified, and we won't start operating them until we're sure that they are safe and meet the standards that we think are necessary to operate this type of a network. So there'll be lots of different types of jobs that will be created in this type of a service. Everything from pilots, because we believe that these vehicles will be piloted in the initial iteration of this type of a service. We think in the long arc, when we're thinking 2050, we think that there is this long-term trend toward autonomous operations, especially for smaller vehicles. It makes a lot of sense. But we think that there's every reason to start with pilots in these vehicles to get going quickly and operate as safely as possible in the near term with them. And then there's all the support services. So there's both engineering, there's the maintenance, repair, and overhaul. If we're able to develop the network in the way that we think the demand will push it, from our simulations, there'll be demand for many, many, many aircraft in this type of network over each of the cities in which we operate. And so there's all the corresponding jobs that come with that in terms of the maintenance types of jobs, in terms of just operations. So there'd be some number of operators at each of the skyports in which we operate from that will be very interesting jobs, and these are all very localized jobs too. So it's not like you have to go far from home on a daily basis to work in this type of a network. And so that's our vision for it.
Well, how are you, as part of that, how are you planning to work with the City of Dallas on building the infrastructure necessary to service this service that you're offering to provide, and with other cities as well? Because obviously cities plan long term, and they need to have some kind of ability to plan for this. And if we're going to really integrate this, how is Uber planning to work with cities on that?
Thank you for the question. So we are trying to work pretty tightly coupled with the cities, all the different cities in the Dallas Metroplex that we're talking to, including not just Dallas, but Fort Worth and Frisco and others. And so we are. What we're trying to do is make sure that we give them early insight into what we're thinking. But we're also partnering with private companies, real estate companies, on the skyport. One of the nice things about this type of a network, vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, is that the infrastructure requirements are quite small compared to what you think if you wanted to put in a new road network, for example. It's a really interesting characteristic of these types of vehicles and networks that they scale by the nodes, essentially. And so you actually put in one more skyport, and you get connectivity to all the other skyports, which scales much better than roads by the mile from a cost perspective. So we're working with private real estate developers to basically develop in a partnership model these types of skyport infrastructure that we need, and keeping the city apprised of what we're doing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Allison. My time is almost expired. Obviously, I have some safety concerns as well that I might be reaching out to you about, and if you could submit some written testimony on that as well, that'd be great. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Allred. Now turn to Representative Stauber of Minnesota, and after that, Mr. Payne will be the next Democrat. Mr. Stauber for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and the Ranking Member Graves. I graduated in 1984, and one of my bucket lists was to become a private pilot. I can share with you that I'm in 43 hours of the Cirrus SR-20 and SR-22. This congressional run and my current occupation here serving the public has stalled my training, but I can say the last flight my instructor says you're ready for solo. I'm not there yet, so I've been interrupted. I will also share with you, you talk about the pilot shortage and what have you. My senior, one of my boys is a senior in high school, and on March 22nd, we will be going to the Aviation Career Expo at Lake Superior College in Duluth, Minnesota, a very well-respected college that teaches pilots to fly and gets them interested in the aviation culture. You know, something that I really want to detail is the NOTAM system, and this is for Captain DePete primarily. We know that in 2017 in San Francisco, the Air Canada bus nearly landed on a crowded taxiway, and they mistook it for a cleared runway. Information about that runway closure could have been prevented. The information was located on page 8 of the 27-page list of the San Francisco Airport NOTAMs. The NOTAMs also are frequently state there's birds in the area, what have you. We don't know what type of birds, if they're on the runway, in the air, or nearby. So Captain DePete, can you please discuss some of the issues with the current state of the NOTAM systems and the concerns you have?
Yes, sir, and thank you for that question. I share those same concerns for many, many years. During my 40 years of flying, I haven't seen very many improvements. In fact, I was really delighted when I heard the chairman of the NTSB mention the problem. I've seen and heard of various efforts underway to streamline it. Believe it or not, in my airline, the technology is such that I can use an iPad that'll actually decipher that, but it's still buried. There's still too many. You think about the expectation. You're showing up for a flight maybe an hour before, and especially if you're flying international, and you're literally presented with a paper stack about that tall, about that thick. And you have to weed through that to see what is relevant and what isn't. And it's almost, I mean, you'd really have to, you'd have to show up. We do. We do whatever it takes to make it safe. But I share your concern with that, and we're actively working to try to fix that. We've got folks that are working in our air. We have the largest non-governmental safety organization in the world, and we're working with the FAA to somehow fix that. But again, you know, this really comes down to the funding issue again. You know, the FAA's taxing, there's so much coming at them from so many different angles, you know, between UAS and commercial space, and we're all a part of that effort. But a steady, reliable source of funding would be a step in the right direction. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Captain, for that answer. And as Ranking Member Graves talks about, aviation is an extremely safe way to travel, and we're going to make it safer. And I appreciate you talking about the funding, because that's what we're meeting for today. So, Captain DePete, I will say this, that I am introducing a bill to form a task force to address these concerns with the NOTAMs, and I hope you'll take part in it. And I think that's one of a number of additional safety items we can bring to the pilots and the culture in aviation, and I hope you'll support that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Before recognizing Mr. Payne for 5 minutes, just a heads up for Mr. Perry, who will be the next Republican. Mr. Payne is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Cooper, Newark Liberty International Airport is in my congressional district. And on January 22nd, 2019, air traffic was suspended at Newark due to a drone sighting. Over 40 flights were held at the gate, while dozens of other planes were left circling, including a United Airlines flight from Jamaica just minutes away from running out of fuel. In addition to being on this subcommittee, I am also a member of the Homeland Security Subcommittee, and I am very concerned about the use of drones for the wrong reasons. Reasons such as a terrorist attack or to cause air traffic disruptions like we experienced in Newark. Do you have any insight or suggestions about how countermeasures that would be useful for the FAA to look into so that Newark and other airports across America can defend against terrorist attacks or other nefarious drone attacks?
Thank you for your question. There are a couple of aspects to your question. So there's the careless and the clueless operators, and then the criminal and terrorist operators, and we deal with them separately. In terms of the careless and clueless operators, educational initiatives similar to the Before You Fly campaign will help get us there. Remote identification, once that's in place and implemented in a lot of the drones, already currently, but in all of them once the mandate is in place, that's going to go a long way to help with enforcement and additional education and compliance activities. Our company provides a Lattice software solution that's integrated into about 80% of the drones flying commercially and as hobbyist drones in the United States. And that geofencing solution actually marks where the airports are, as well as critical infrastructure, prisons, places that are too sensitive for people to fly generally without special permission. And so that technology is already available today, and industry has been helping things move forward to help prevent these types of incidents from occurring. In terms of the criminal activities, we're going to need countermeasures in place, and Congress has acted to extend those authorities to a couple of agencies in the Reauthorization Act.
Okay. And you mentioned the importance of remote identification in your testimony. Can you discuss the role that remote identification could play in stopping the use of drones for the wrong reasons, such as terrorist attacks, causing air traffic disruptions, or illegal actions like smuggling narcotics?
So remote identification is already implemented in a lot of the drones available today. However, there's not a legal mandate for operators to comply. Remote ID will help solve the needle in the haystack problem. So currently you can't tell who's a friend versus a foe when you see a drone flying. So this will help with enforcing local laws as well as federal laws that are already in place that are technology neutral.
Well, thank you. And Mr. Chairman,